The sound of her father's voice, raised in anger, echoed through the general store in Pinos Altos, New Mexico. And Fiona Catherine knew her life was about to change in a way she desperately did not want. Standing near the bolts of fabric at the back of the store, she could hear every word her father exchanged with the silver-haired banker from Santa Fe, and each syllable felt like a nail being hammered into the coffin of her future. "My daughter will make a fine wife for your son," her father declared loudly enough for half the town to hear. "She's 20 years old, healthy as a horse, and she knows how to run a household." Fiona gripped the edge of the fabric table so hard her knuckles turned white. She had met Richard Pemberton exactly once, 3 months ago, when he had come to Pinos Altos on business with his father. The man was 38 years old, soft around the middle, and had looked at her the way someone might appraise livestock at auction. He had thin lips that never quite smiled and cold blue eyes that seemed to calculate the worth of everything they saw. "Your family's debts would be cleared entirely," the elder Pemberton said in a voice like oil sliding across water. "And Fiona would want for nothing in Santa Fe. My son's home has 12 rooms and a staff of 4. "When would you want the wedding?" her father asked, and Fiona felt her stomach drop. 2 weeks. We have already arranged for the ceremony to take place at the church in Santa Fe. Your family would, of course, be welcome to attend." 2 weeks. Fiona closed her eyes and felt the walls of her future closing in. Her mother had died 3 years ago from fever, leaving Fiona to care for her younger siblings, while her father threw away what little money they had at card tables and whiskey bottles. The debts had piled up like snow in winter, and now he was selling her to clear them. She moved toward the door of the general store, needing air, needing space, needing anything but to hear more of this transaction. The July heat hit her like a wall when she stepped outside, but she welcomed it. The main street of Pinos Altos stretched before her, dusty and familiar. The town sat high in the mountains of southwestern New Mexico, surrounded by ponderosa pines and rocky peaks. Gold had been discovered here back in 1860, and while the boom had faded, enough miners and settlers remained to keep the town alive. Fiona walked quickly toward the edge of town, her worn brown dress stirring up small clouds of dust with each step. She passed the saloon, where rough laughter spilled out into the afternoon, past the blacksmith shop where the ring of hammer on anvil provided a steady rhythm, past the small church with its simple wooden cross. She did not stop until she reached the tree line where the pines began their march up the mountainside. That was where she let herself cry, pressing her back against the rough bark of a ponderosa and sliding down until she sat on the ground. She was trapped. If she refused the marriage, her father would likely throw her out and her 2 younger sisters would suffer. If she accepted, she would spend the rest of her life in a gilded cage with a man she did not love, could not love, would never love. "You all right, miss?" The voice startled her so badly she nearly jumped to her feet. When she looked up, she had to crane her neck back to take in the full height of the man standing a few yards away. He was massive, easily over 6 feet tall, with shoulders that seemed wide enough to block out the sun. His hair was dark brown and fell past his shoulders, tied back loosely with a leather cord. His face was weathered and tanned, with a strong jaw shadowed by several days of beard growth. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, a warm brown that held genuine concern rather than calculation. He wore buckskin trousers and a simple homespun shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle. A hunting knife hung at his belt, and he carried a rifle with the easy familiarity of a man who lived by it. Everything about him spoke of strength and capability, of a life lived in the wild places rather than in town. "I'm fine," Fiona said automatically, then winced at how obviously false that statement was given her tear-stained cheeks. The man tilted his head slightly, studying her with those warm eyes. "You do not look fine. But if you want to be left alone, I can understand that too." Something about the gentle way he spoke, combined with his offer to leave her be, made Fiona's carefully constructed walls crumble. "They are marrying me off," she heard herself say. "My father made the arrangement today. 2 weeks from now, I'm supposed to marry a banker's son in Santa Fe, who I have met exactly once and who looks at me like I am property he is acquiring." The mountain man's jaw tightened, and something dangerous flashed in his eyes before it was replaced with sympathy. That's a hard thing, he said quietly. He moved closer, still maintaining a respectful distance, and lowered himself to sit against a nearby tree. I'm Nathan Hayes. Most folks just call me Hayes. I trap and hunt up in these mountains, come into town maybe once a month for supplies. Fiona Catherine, she replied, wiping at her cheeks with the back of her hand. Most folks call me Fiona or Miss Catherine, depending on how formal they are feeling. Well, Miss Fiona, Nathan said, and there was something comforting in the way he combined both forms of address. I cannot claim to understand all the complications of town life and family obligations. I have been living up in these mountains for the better part of 8 years now, ever since I was 21 years old. But I do know something about being trapped and needing a way out. Fiona looked at him properly for the first time, really seeing him. There was no judgment in his expression, no calculation, no hidden agenda that she could detect. Just honest sympathy from one human being to another. What did you do? She asked. When you were trapped? I left, Nathan said simply. My father wanted me to take over his freight business in Kansas City, wanted me to marry the daughter of his business partner, settle down, produce grandchildren who would inherit the whole enterprise. I tried it for a year, felt like I was suffocating the entire time. So one night, I packed what I could carry, left a letter explaining myself, and headed west. Ended up here in these mountains and found I could finally breathe again. I cannot just leave, Fiona said. I have 2 younger sisters. If I refuse this marriage or run away, my father will throw me out and there will be no one to protect Mary and Sarah. He drinks, you see. When our mother was alive, she could manage him. But now, she trailed off, not wanting to speak the worst of it aloud. Nathan was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant, as if he was working through a complex problem. What if you had another option, he finally said. What if you could marry someone else, someone who would pay off your father's debts, but would not expect you to be property? Fiona stared at him, not quite understanding. I do not know anyone with that kind of money who would do such a thing. I have money, Nathan said, and there was no boast in it, just a statement of fact. 8 years of trapping and selling furs with almost nothing to spend it on except supplies and ammunition. I have saved most of what I have earned. It is sitting in a bank in Silver City, doing nothing. Why would you help me? Fiona asked, bewildered. You do not even know me. Nathan leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. Maybe because I know what it feels like to be pushed toward a life you do not want. Maybe because I have a sister back in Kansas, and I would hope someone would help her if she was in a similar situation. Or maybe, and here a slight smile touched his lips, because I am tired of talking to trees and deer, and the idea of having human company does not sound terrible. You're suggesting we get married? Fiona said slowly, wanting to make sure she understood correctly. You and me, complete strangers? I am suggesting I give you a choice, Nathan corrected. You can marry the banker's son and live a life of comfort with a man you do not trust or respect. Or you can marry me, and we can figure out together what kind of life we want to build. I will not force you to be anything you do not want to be. I will not treat you as property, and your sisters can come visit whenever they want, stay as long as they need to. Fiona's mind raced. This was insane. She had known this man for all of 10 minutes, but as she looked at him, at the honest openness in his expression, at the strength in his frame that spoke of protection rather than dominance, she felt something stir inside her. Hope, perhaps, or possibility. I need to think about this, she said. Of course, Nathan replied immediately. I will be in town until tomorrow evening, getting supplies. I'm staying at the boarding house on 2nd Street. You know where that is? Fiona nodded. Everyone in Pinos Altos knew Mrs. Rodriguez's boarding house. Take whatever time you need, Nathan said, rising to his feet with an easy grace, surprising for a man his size. But if you decide you want to take me up on the offer, come find me. We will figure out the details together. He touched the brim of his hat in a gesture of respect, and then walked back toward town, leaving Fiona alone with her thoughts and a decision that would shape the rest of her life. That evening, Fiona sat at the dinner table with her father and sisters, pushing food around her plate without eating. Her father was in a good mood, already celebrating the money that would soon flow from the Pemberton family coffers. He did not seem to notice or care that his eldest daughter looked like she might be sick. Father, Fiona said during a lull in his monologue about all the things he would do once the debts were cleared. What if I wanted to marry someone else? Her father's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. What? What if I had another offer, from someone who could also clear the debts? Her father's eyes narrowed. There is no one else. I've already given my word to Pemberton. The arrangements are made. But if there was someone else... Enough! Her father slammed his hand on the table hard enough to make the plates jump. You will marry Richard Pemberton in 2 weeks, and that is the end of this discussion. I will not have you embarrassing this family by backing out of the arrangement. 12-year-old Mary and 14-year-old Sarah both stared at their plates, their bodies tense. Fiona recognized the signs. When their father got like this, it was best to stay quiet and still. She swallowed her words and nodded, but inside, her decision was crystallizing. After dinner, while her father went to the saloon as he did every night, Fiona helped her sisters clean up. Once the dishes were washed and put away, she gathered them both in the small bedroom they all shared. I need to tell you something, Fiona said, sitting on the edge of the bed they all squeezed into each night. But you have to promise not to tell Father. Both girls nodded, their eyes wide. I met someone today. A mountain man named Nathan Hayes. He has offered to marry me instead of Mr. Pemberton. He would pay off Father's debts just like the Pembertons would, but he would also treat me with respect and kindness. You're going to run away, Mary whispered, her voice a mix of fear and excitement. Not run away, Fiona said. I am going to marry Nathan properly, with a preacher and everything. Father cannot object if another man is willing to pay the debts. The arrangement with the Pembertons was always about the money. What is he like? Sarah asked. This mountain man? Fiona thought about Nathan's warm brown eyes, about the gentle way he had spoken to her, about the strength in his frame that promised protection. He is kind, she said, and I think he is honest. I know it seems crazy to marry someone I just met, but it cannot be crazier than marrying Mr. Pemberton, who made my skin crawl. Will you still see us? Mary asked, and her voice was small and scared. Fiona pulled both girls into a tight embrace. Of course. Nathan said you can visit whenever you want. Stay as long as you need. I will always be your sister. I will always be here for you. They held each other for a long moment, and then Fiona released them and stood. I am going to the boarding house now to tell Nathan my decision. Go to bed at the normal time. If Father asks where I am, tell him I went for a walk. I will be back before he is home from the saloon. The evening air was cooler than the afternoon had been, and Fiona wrapped a shawl around her shoulders as she made her way through town. Most folks had retired for the night, though golden light spilled from the saloon windows, and she could hear piano music mixed with rough male voices. She walked quickly past, not wanting to risk her father seeing her. Mrs. Rodriguez's boarding house was a neat 2-story building on the quieter end of 2nd Street. Fiona knocked on the door, and the proprietress herself answered, a stout woman with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. Can I help you, dear? Mrs. Rodriguez asked, her eyes taking in Fiona's flushed cheeks and determined expression. I am looking for Nathan Hayes. I believe he is staying here? He is. Mrs. Rodriguez studied her for a moment longer, then seemed to make a decision. Wait here. She disappeared inside, leaving Fiona standing on the porch. A few minutes later, Nathan appeared, ducking slightly to clear the doorframe. He had cleaned up since the afternoon, his hair still damp from washing, his jaw freshly shaved. He looked younger this way, though no less imposing. Miss Fiona, he said, and there was a question in his voice. I want to accept your offer, Fiona said before she could lose her nerve. I want to marry you instead of Richard Pemberton, if the offer still stands. Something that might have been relief crossed Nathan's face. It stands, he said. Come, let us walk and talk about how to make this happen. They walked to the edge of town again, to the place where the pines began. The moon was nearly full, providing enough light to see by, and the air smelled of pine resin and distant wood smoke. How much does your father owe? Nathan asked. $800, Fiona said, maybe a bit more. He has debts all over town, plus a large sum to the bank. Nathan nodded slowly. I can cover that. I will need to ride to Silver City tomorrow to withdraw the money from the bank there. That will take most of the day. When I get back tomorrow evening, I will go to your father and make the offer. If he agrees, we can be married the day after. What if he refuses? Fiona asked. What if he insists on the arrangement with the Pembertons because he has already given his word? Then we will find another way, Nathan said firmly. But I suspect your father is more interested in clearing his debts than in keeping his word to a banker. Money talks louder than promises, in my experience." They walked in silence for a few minutes, and Fiona tried to wrap her mind around the enormity of what she was doing. In less than 2 days, if all went according to plan, she would be married to this man. This stranger, this mountain man who lived alone in the wilderness and spoke with such calm certainty about changing the course of her entire life. "What is your cabin like?" she asked, suddenly curious about the practical details of her future. "It is so." "It is not fancy," Nathan admitted. "One large room with a sleeping area at one end, a kitchen area at the other, and a stone fireplace in the middle. I built it myself about 6 years ago when I decided to stop moving around so much. It is solid and warm in winter, stays relatively cool in summer. There's a good stream nearby for water, and the hunting is excellent." "How far from town?" "About 5 miles northwest, up in the higher elevations, far enough that you cannot hear town noise, close enough that it is not a terrible journey if you need to come in for supplies or to visit your sisters." Fiona absorbed this information, trying to picture the life he was describing. "I should tell you that I have never lived anywhere but a town. I do not know much about wilderness living." "I figured as much," Nathan said, and there was no judgment in his tone. "I will teach you what you need to know, and if you hate it after a few months, we will figure something else out, maybe build a place closer to town, or even move into town if that is what you want. This does not have to be a trap, Fiona. It is supposed to be the opposite of one." They had reached a small clearing where the moonlight fell unobstructed, silvering the grass. Nathan stopped and turned to face her fully. "I want you to understand something," he said. "I'm offering you marriage, but I am not demanding anything from you that you are not willing to give. We can take as much time as you need to get comfortable with each other. The cabin has a large bed, but I can sleep on furs by the fire until you decide otherwise, or forever, if that is what you choose." Fiona felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she appreciated his directness. "You would truly do that? Marry me, but not expect marital relations?" "I would truly do that," Nathan confirmed. "I want a partner, Fiona, someone to share my life with. If affection and intimacy grow between us over time, that would be good. But I will not force anything, and I will not rush you." In that moment, standing in the moonlit clearing with this gentle giant of a man, making promises that gave her power rather than took it away, Fiona felt something shift in her chest. It was not love, not yet, but it was the beginning of trust. And trust, she suspected, might be even more important. "All right," she said, "let us do this. Let us get married and see what kind of life we can build together." Nathan smiled then, a real smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes and made him look almost boyish despite his size and weathered features. "All right," he echoed. "I will ride to Silver City at first light. I should be back by evening. Wait for me to talk to your father. It will be better if I am the one to make the offer." "He might get angry," Fiona warned. "He has a terrible temper, especially when he drinks." "I can handle angry men," Nathan said, and there was quiet confidence in his voice. Not bravado, just the simple knowledge of his own capabilities. "You just make sure you and your sisters are safe. If things go badly, you come straight to Mrs. Rodriguez's boarding house. Understand?" Fiona nodded, and they walked back toward town together. At the edge of the main street, Nathan stopped. "I will see you tomorrow evening," he said. "One way or another, we will work this out." Fiona surprised herself by reaching out and touching his arm briefly. Even through his shirt, she could feel the solid muscle beneath. "Thank you," she said, "for giving me a choice, for caring enough to offer one." Nathan covered her hand with his own for just a moment, his palm warm and rough with calluses. "Everyone deserves choices," he said simply. Then he released her hand and headed back toward the boarding house, while Fiona made her way home. The next day passed in a blur of nervous energy. Fiona went through her normal routines, washing clothes and preparing meals and watching her sisters. But her mind was elsewhere. She kept imagining different scenarios for how the evening might unfold. Would her father accept Nathan's offer? Would he fly into a rage? Would the Pembertons find out and cause trouble? By the time the sun began its descent toward the western peaks, Fiona's stomach was tied in knots. She positioned herself near the front window of their small house, watching the street for any sign of Nathan's return. He appeared just as the sky was turning gold and orange with sunset, riding a sturdy bay horse and leading a pack mule laden with supplies. Even from a distance, his size and distinctive long hair made him easy to identify. He stopped at the boarding house first, presumably to drop off his supplies, then headed in the direction of Fiona's house. Her father was home for once. He had been in a foul mood all day, snapping at the girls and complaining about various slights and inconveniences. When the knock came at the door, he answered it himself. "Can I help you?" Fiona heard him say, his tone suspicious. "I am Nathan Hayes," came the reply, calm and steady. "I would like to speak with you about your daughter Fiona, if you have a few minutes." Fiona moved to where she could see the doorway. Her father's face had gone red, but he stepped back to let Nathan in. The mountain man had to duck to clear the doorframe, and once inside, he seemed to take up an enormous amount of space, not because he was trying to be intimidating, but simply because he was that large. "What about my daughter?" her father demanded. "I understand you have arranged for her to marry Richard Pemberton in 2 weeks," Nathan said. "I am here to make a different offer." "The arrangements are already made," her father said, but Fiona could hear the calculation in his voice. He was wondering what Nathan could possibly offer. "I would like to marry Fiona myself," Nathan said, "and I am prepared to pay $1,000 to clear your debts and provide her with a dowry." The room went absolutely silent. $1,000 was $200 more than her father owed. It was a fortune in a place like Pinos Altos. "You are not serious," her father said, but his eyes had gone sharp with greed. "I'm completely serious." Nathan reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. "This is a bank draft for $1,000, drawn on the bank in Silver City. It is yours if you agree to let me marry Fiona tomorrow." Fiona watched her father's face cycle through several emotions, greed warring with suspicion, calculation, battling pride. "Why?" he finally asked. "Why would you pay so much for a girl you do not even know?" "That is between me and Fiona," Nathan said calmly. "The question is whether you will accept the offer. Because if you will not, I will take it to the Pembertons and explain that there has been a change in circumstances. I suspect they would rather not have their son marry a woman who is in love with someone else." It was a lie, of course. Fiona was not in love with Nathan, but it was a strategic lie, one designed to give her father an out that would not damage his pride too badly. Her father stared at the envelope in Nathan's hand for a long moment. Then he snatched it from him. "Fine," he said. "You can marry her. But I want this transaction done properly, with a preacher and witnesses." "Of course," Nathan agreed. "Tomorrow afternoon at the church. I will arrange everything with Reverend Morrison." "Tomorrow afternoon," her father repeated. Then he turned and walked away, already counting the money in his head, no doubt. Nathan found Fiona with his eyes, and she saw the question there. She nodded once, firmly, and saw relief wash across his features. "I will see you tomorrow, then," Nathan said, speaking to Fiona now rather than her father. "At the church. 2:00, if that suits you." 2:00, Fiona confirmed, and her voice came out steadier than she felt. Nathan left then, and Fiona sank down onto the nearest chair, her legs suddenly weak. It was done. The arrangement was made. In less than 24 hours, she would be married to Nathan Hayes. That night, Fiona lay awake in bed with her sisters pressed close on either side of her. Neither girl had said much after learning what would happen the next day, but Fiona could feel their fear and uncertainty in the way they clung to her. "I will write to you every week," Fiona whispered into the darkness, "and you can visit me whenever Father allows it. This is not goodbye forever. It is just goodbye to us living in the same house." "Promise you will be happy," Mary whispered back. "I will try my very best," Fiona said, and meant it. The next morning dawned clear and warm, the kind of July day that made Pinos Altos feel almost perfect despite all its rough edges. Fiona washed and dressed in her best gown, a simple blue cotton dress that her mother had made for her 3 years before. It was slightly faded now, the hem mended in places, but it was clean and pressed and the best she had. Sarah helped her arrange her auburn hair, pinning it up in a style more elaborate than Fiona usually wore. Mary picked wildflowers from the edge of town and wove them into a small bouquet. Their father, already flush with spending money despite not having officially collected the bank draft yet, had disappeared to the saloon. At 1:45, Fiona and her sisters walked to the church. Reverend Morrison was already there, as was Nathan. The mountain man had cleaned up again, wearing dark trousers and a clean white shirt that stretched across his broad shoulders. His hair was tied back neatly, and he had shaved. When he saw Fiona, his face lit up with a smile that made her stomach flutter in an unfamiliar way. Mrs. Rodriguez was there as well, along with 2 other townspeople who would serve as witnesses. Fiona's father showed up at 5 minutes past 2, smelling of whiskey, but managing to stand upright. The ceremony was brief and simple. Reverend Morrison spoke about the sanctity of marriage and the promises being made. Nathan's voice was steady and sure when he spoke his vows. Fiona's voice shook a little, but she got through them. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Morrison said. "You may kiss your bride." Nathan stepped closer, his eyes asking permission. Fiona nodded almost imperceptibly, and he leaned down, pressing his lips to hers in a kiss that was gentle and respectful, and over almost before it began. But in that brief moment of contact, Fiona felt a spark of something, a promise of warmth that might grow into something more. They signed the papers that made it official, and then it was done. Fiona Catherine was now Fiona Hayes, and her life was forever changed. Her father left immediately after the ceremony, presumably to go deposit the bank draft and then continue his drinking. Fiona hugged her sisters tightly, murmuring promises and reassurances, and then she watched them walk away with a mixture of relief and sadness. "Are you ready?" Nathan asked gently. Fiona took a deep breath and turned to face him. "I'm ready." Nathan had a horse waiting for her, a gentle mare with kind eyes. He helped Fiona mount, his hands strong and steady, and then swung up onto his own bay gelding. With the pack mule trailing behind, they rode out of Pinos Altos, heading northwest into the mountains. The ride took about 2 hours, following narrow trails that wound through stands of ponderosa pine and open meadows dotted with wildflowers. The higher they climbed, the cooler the air became, and Fiona found herself relaxing bit by bit. The mountains were beautiful, she realized. She had lived in their shadow her whole life, but had never really explored them. "We are almost there," Nathan said as they crested a ridge. The cabin sat in a small valley surrounded by trees, with a stream running along one side. It was larger than Fiona had imagined based on Nathan's description, built from solid logs chinked with mud and moss. A covered porch ran along the front, and she could see a vegetable garden to one side and a small corral with 2 goats and a few chickens. "You have goats?" Fiona said, surprised. "For milk and cheese," Nathan explained, dismounting and then helping her down from her horse. "The chickens provide eggs. I hunt for most of my meat, but it's nice to have some variety." He opened the door and gestured for her to enter first. The interior was dim after the bright sunlight, but as her eyes adjusted, Fiona took in the space that would be her new home. Nathan had not lied when he said it was not fancy, but it was clean and well organized. The sleeping area at the far end had a large bed covered with quilts and furs. The kitchen area near the door had a sturdy table, shelves for dishes and supplies, and a cast-iron stove. The stone fireplace in the middle was clearly the heart of the home, built with skill and care. "It is nice," Fiona said, and was surprised to find she meant it. The cabin felt solid and safe, a refuge rather than a prison. "I'm glad you think so," Nathan said, and she could hear the relief in his voice. "I know it is different from town living, but I will do everything I can to make you comfortable here." Over the next few hours, Nathan showed her around, explaining where things were kept and how various systems worked. He showed her how to work the cast-iron stove, where he kept the supplies, how to collect eggs from the chickens and milk the goats. He showed her the stream where they got water and the small smokehouse where he cured meat. "You have put a lot of work into this place," Fiona observed as they stood on the porch watching the sun descend behind the western peaks. "I have," Nathan agreed. "For a long time, I was just surviving up here. But eventually, I wanted more than that. I wanted to build something, create a real home. I just never had anyone to share it with." He glanced at her, his expression open and a little vulnerable. "I know this is not the life you imagined for yourself, but I hope, maybe, it can become a good life anyway." Fiona thought about the alternative, about being trapped in a fancy house in Santa Fe with a man who saw her as property. "I think it already is a better life," she said honestly. That evening, Nathan made dinner while Fiona watched and tried to help. He was surprisingly skilled at camp cooking, and the stew he prepared was hearty and flavorful. They ate at the table while twilight deepened outside, making stilted conversation about neutral topics. Both of them were clearly nervous, dancing around the reality that they were now married strangers, trying to figure out how to live together. When full darkness fell, Nathan banked the fire and lit a few candles. Then he pulled a pile of furs and blankets from a storage chest and began making a bed on the floor near the fireplace. "You should take the bed," he said, not looking at her. "It is more comfortable, and you have had a long day." Fiona watched him work, watched the way his muscles moved under his shirt as he arranged the furs. She thought about his promises, about the patience and respect he had offered. She thought about the trust that was slowly growing between them. "Nathan," she said. He looked up, and in the candlelight, his eyes were warm and gentle. "You do not have to sleep on the floor," Fiona said. "The bed is large enough for both of us, and I trust you to keep your word about not demanding anything I am not ready to give." Nathan studied her for a long moment. "Are you sure? I truly do not mind sleeping here." "I am sure," Fiona said, and was surprised to find she really was. "We are married. We should start learning to share space and be comfortable with each other." Nathan nodded slowly and left the furs where they were, just in case she changed her mind. They took turns changing into nightclothes, giving each other privacy. Then they lay down on opposite sides of the large bed, a careful distance between them. "Good night, Fiona," Nathan said softly. "Good night, Nathan," she replied. Fiona expected to lie awake for hours, her mind spinning with all the changes and uncertainties, but the bed was comfortable, the room was cool and quiet, and the sound of Nathan's steady breathing was oddly soothing. Within minutes, she drifted off into the deepest sleep she had experienced in months. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that was both strange and surprisingly comfortable. Nathan woke early each morning to tend the animals and check his trap lines. Fiona learned to manage the household tasks, cooking meals and maintaining the cabin and caring for the chickens and goats. Nathan was patient when she made mistakes, showing her how to improve without criticism. Fiona found herself enjoying the work, taking pride in learning new skills. In the afternoons, Nathan often took her on walks through the surrounding mountains, teaching her about the land and the creatures that lived there. He showed her which plants were edible and which were medicinal, how to read animal tracks and predict weather patterns. He pointed out the best fishing spots in the stream and the places where deer came to drink at dawn. Fiona discovered that she loved the wilderness. She loved the quiet, broken only by bird song and wind through the pines. She loved the way the air smelled clean and fresh. She loved the vast sky full of more stars than she had ever seen from town. And she found herself watching Nathan more and more, watching the easy way he moved through the forest despite his size, watching the gentle care he showed the animals, watching his hands as he worked, strong and capable, watching his face when he thought she was not looking, the way his expression would soften when his eyes landed on her. They talked during meals and in the evenings, slowly learning each other's stories. Nathan told her about growing up in Kansas City, about his restless spirit that had never fit into the mold his father wanted, about the first time he saw mountains and felt like he had found where he belonged, about the loneliness that crept in during long winters, the nagging feeling that something was missing from his life, no matter how perfect the solitude seemed. Fiona told him about her mother, about the way her death had changed everything, about her sisters and her fierce love for them, about her dreams of one day having her own family, one built on love and respect rather than obligation and fear. "You will have that," Nathan said one evening about 3 weeks after their marriage. They were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. "If that is what you want, a family built on love, I would like that too." Fiona turned to look at him, at this man who had given her freedom when he could have demanded submission, this man who had kept every promise he made and asked for nothing in return, this man who she was starting to realize she might be falling in love with. "Nathan," she said softly. He met her eyes and she saw vulnerability there, hope mixed with fear of rejection. "I think we are building it already," Fiona continued, "that family. It is not finished yet, but the foundation is there. Do you feel it too?" "Yes," Nathan said, his voice rough with emotion. "I feel it. Every day I wake up and you are here, and it feels more real, more right." They sat in silence for a moment, hands not quite touching on the wooden bench between them. Then, slowly, Fiona moved her hand until it covered his. Nathan turned his palm up and laced their fingers together, and they sat like that until full darkness fell and the stars came out. That night, when they lay down in bed, the distance between them was smaller. Not gone, but reduced. A week later, Fiona woke from a dream to find herself pressed against Nathan's side, her head on his shoulder. She started to pull away, embarrassed, but his arm tightened around her. "Stay," he murmured, still half asleep. "Feels good." Fiona relaxed against him, feeling the steady beat of his heart under her ear, the warmth of his body along her side. It did feel good. It felt right. The physical attraction had been growing alongside the emotional connection. Fiona noticed the way her pulse quickened when Nathan returned from checking traps, his shirt damp with sweat and his muscles visible beneath the fabric. Noticed the way her breath caught when he smiled at her. Noticed the way her body responded to his proximity, warmth pooling low in her belly. Nathan clearly felt it too. She caught him watching her sometimes with an intensity that made her skin flush, caught the way his hands lingered when he helped her down from her horse, caught the barely audible hitch in his breathing when she passed close by him in the confines of the cabin. They were dancing around desire, both waiting for the other to make the first real move. It was Fiona who finally broke the stalemate. About 6 weeks after their wedding, on a warm August evening, she finished cleaning up after dinner and turned to find Nathan watching her with that look in his eyes, the one that made her feel beautiful and wanted. "Nathan," she said, setting down the dish towel, "I want you to know that I am not waiting anymore because I'm scared or unsure. I'm waiting because I wanted to be certain. I wanted this to be a real choice, made freely, not something I felt obligated to do because we are married." Nathan stood slowly from where he had been sitting at the table. "And are you certain now?" "I am," Fiona said, meeting his eyes directly. "I want you. I want to be your wife in every sense of the word. I want to build this life with you, and I want to stop sleeping with a careful distance between us." Nathan crossed the room in 3 long strides, but when he reached her, he moved with exquisite gentleness. He cupped her face in his large hands, his calloused thumbs stroking her cheeks. "I want that too," he said, his voice low and rough. "I have wanted it for weeks now, but I need you to know that we can stop at any time. If anything feels wrong or too fast, you just say the word and we slow down or stop completely. Understood?" "Understood," Fiona said. Then she rose on her toes and kissed him. This kiss was nothing like the brief chaste brush of lips at their wedding. This was heat and hunger, weeks of building tension finally released. Nathan's arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her close against his body, and Fiona slid her hands up into his long hair, tugging it free from its leather tie. They made their way to the bed without breaking the kiss, helping each other undress with fumbling hands and breathless laughter. When Nathan laid her down on the furs and quilts, his eyes roamed over her body with such reverence that Fiona felt tears prick her eyes. "You are so beautiful," he murmured, his hand tracing the curve of her waist. "I cannot believe you are really mine." "I cannot believe you are really mine," Fiona replied, running her hands over the broad expanse of his chest, feeling the muscles shift beneath her palms. Their joining was tender and slow, Nathan careful to watch her reactions, to make sure she found pleasure in every moment. There was some pain, as there always is the first time, but it was brief and forgotten in the wave of sensation and connection that followed. They moved together, learning each other's rhythms, and when release came, it was for both of them, leaving them tangled together and breathless. Afterward, Nathan held her close, his hand tracing lazy patterns on her back. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. More than all right," Fiona said, pressing a kiss to his chest. "That was perfect." "I love you," Nathan said, the words spilling out as if he could not hold them back any longer. "I think I started falling in love with you the moment I saw you crying under that tree. Every day since has just made it stronger." Fiona tilted her head back to look at him, seeing the truth of his words written plainly on his face. "I love you too," she said, and felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. "I was not sure at first if what I felt was love or just gratitude, but I know now. It is love, real and deep and growing stronger every day." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and when Fiona woke in the morning with Nathan's arm heavy across her waist and his breath warm on her neck, She felt a sense of peace and belonging she had never experienced before. The rest of the summer and early fall passed in a haze of happiness. Nathan taught Fiona to shoot, first with a rifle and then with a pistol, so she could protect herself and hunt small game when needed. Fiona proved to have a natural eye for shooting, much to Nathan's delight. They worked together to expand the garden and preserve food for winter. They made love frequently, learning each other's bodies with thorough attention, building a physical connection as strong as their emotional one. In September, Fiona's sisters came for a visit, arriving with the mail carrier who made monthly runs through the area. Mary and Sarah spent a week at the cabin, and Fiona reveled in their presence. Nathan was wonderful with them, patient and kind, treating them like the younger sisters he had never had. He taught them to fish in the stream and helped them braid wildflowers into crowns. Watching him with them made Fiona fall even more deeply in love. "You seem happy," Sarah said one evening when the girls were preparing for bed. The sisters were sleeping in the loft space above the main room that Nathan had hastily improved when he learned they were coming. "I am happy," Fiona confirmed, "happier than I ever thought I could be." "He is good to you?" Mary asked, her young face serious. "He is wonderful to me," Fiona said, "kind and patient and loving. Marrying him was the best decision I could have made." When the sisters left a few days later, it was with promises to visit again soon. Fiona waved goodbye until they disappeared from sight, then turned to find Nathan watching her with soft eyes. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For being so good to them, for making them feel welcome here, for giving me a home where my family can visit." Nathan pulled her close, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "This is their home too, anytime they need it. You are a package deal, you and your sisters. I knew that from the start." In late October, Fiona realized her monthly courses were late. Then she began waking with nausea, and her breasts became tender and swollen. She recognized the signs even before she missed a second monthly course, but she waited to be certain before telling Nathan. He had gone to check the trap lines, a journey that would take most of the day. Fiona spent the morning planning how to share the news. She wanted to make it special, to mark this moment as the beginning of the next chapter of their life together. When Nathan returned in the late afternoon, cold and tired from a day in the increasingly chilly mountains, he found Fiona waiting with hot food and a warm fire. She let him eat and warm up before she spoke. "I have something to tell you," she said, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Nathan looked up from his plate, immediately attentive to her tone. "What is it? Is something wrong?" "Nothing is wrong," Fiona said quickly. "In fact, something is very right. Nathan, I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Nathan just stared at her, his expression stunned. Then a smile broke across his face, so bright and joyful that it made Fiona's breath catch. He stood so abruptly his chair tipped over, but he did not seem to notice. He crossed to her in 2 long strides and swept her up into his arms, spinning her around while laughing. "We are having a baby," he said, his voice full of wonder. "A baby, our baby." "Yes," Fiona laughed, holding onto his shoulders. "Due sometime in late May or early June, I think." Nathan set her down gently, then immediately knelt in front of her, pressing his face against her still flat stomach. "Hello, little one," he murmured. "I am your father, and I already love you more than you can imagine." Fiona ran her fingers through his long hair, tears streaming down her cheeks. Happy tears, overwhelmed tears, tears of gratitude for the strange and wonderful path that had led her to this moment. The winter that followed was cold and harsh, with snow piling high around the cabin. But inside, they were warm and snug. Nathan proved to be even more protective than usual, barely letting Fiona lift anything heavy or venture far from the cabin. She found his overprotectiveness annoying at times, but also deeply touching. They spent the long winter evenings planning for the baby. Nathan began building a cradle from pine wood, carving intricate designs into the sides. Fiona sewed tiny clothes and blankets from fabric Nathan purchased on his monthly trips to town. They argued good-naturedly over names, making lists and crossing them out and making new lists. "If it is a boy, I like Noah," Nathan said one evening in February while the wind howled outside. "Noah Hayes," Fiona tested the name, then nodded. "I like it. Strong but gentle. What about for a girl?" "I've always liked the name Eleanor," Nathan said, "but I'm open to other ideas." "Eleanor Hayes," Fiona said, then smiled. That is beautiful. So Noah or Eleanor. We have our names. In March, as the snow began to melt and the first signs of spring appeared, Fiona woke one morning to cramping and spotting. Panic seized her immediately, fear that she was losing the baby. Nathan, seeing her distress, held her close and spoke with calm certainty. "We are going to town," he said. "Right now. There's a doctor there, and he will check to make sure everything is all right." The ride to Pinos Altos was terrifying, every jolt making Fiona certain that something terrible was happening. But by the time they arrived, the cramping had subsided, and the spotting had stopped. The doctor, an elderly man with kind eyes, examined her and declared that both she and the baby seemed fine. "Sometimes these things happen," he said, "especially in the middle months. But everything feels as it should. The baby's heartbeat is strong. Just take it easy for a few days, and if it happens again or gets worse, come back immediately." The relief Fiona felt was almost overwhelming. Nathan held her hand the entire way back to the cabin, and that night he was extra gentle, holding her close and whispering reassurances until she fell asleep. April brought warmer weather and the return of green to the mountains. Fiona's belly had grown round and firm, and she felt the baby moving inside her, little flutters at first and then stronger kicks. Nathan loved to put his hand on her belly and feel the movements, his face lighting up every time. "Active little thing," he said with a grin. "Going to be a wild one, I think." "Takes after their father," Fiona teased. They were lying in bed, the morning sun streaming through the window, when Nathan suddenly propped himself up on one elbow and looked at her seriously. "I want you to know something," he said. "No matter what happens when this baby comes, you are my first priority. If the doctor has to make a choice, I want you to be the one who survives. Do you understand?" "Nathan," Fiona started, but he shook his head. I need to know you understand," he said firmly. "I love this baby already. But you are my heart, Fiona. You are the one who made my life complete. I cannot lose you." Fiona took his face in her hands, looking into his worried eyes. "You are not going to lose me," she said. "I am strong, and this baby is strong, and everything is going to be fine. But I understand what you are saying, and I love you for it." In mid-May, on a warm afternoon when the meadows were carpeted with wildflowers, Fiona's water broke. She was outside feeding the chickens when it happened, and the sudden gush of fluid took her by surprise. She stood there for a moment, chicken feed forgotten, as the reality hit her. "Nathan!" she called, and he appeared almost instantly from the corral where he had been working. One look at her face, and he knew. "It is time?" "It is time," Fiona confirmed. Nathan moved with swift efficiency, getting Fiona settled in the cabin and then riding hard for town to fetch the doctor and the midwife. Fiona labored alone for the few hours it took him to return, breathing through contractions and trying not to be scared. When Nathan returned with the doctor and a capable midwife named Mrs. Sullivan, Fiona could have cried with relief. The labor was long and hard, lasting through the afternoon and into the evening. Nathan stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand and letting her squeeze until she thought she might break his fingers. He wiped her face with cool cloths and murmured encouragement and never once complained or left her side. Just as the sun was setting, painting the cabin in warm golden light, Fiona gave one final push and heard the most beautiful sound in the world, a baby crying. "It is a boy," the midwife announced, holding up the squalling infant. "A big, healthy boy." Noah Hayes was indeed big, weighing close to 9 pounds with a shock of dark hair and lungs that worked spectacularly well. The midwife cleaned him and wrapped him in a blanket, then placed him in Fiona's arms. Fiona looked down at her son and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. He was perfect. Absolutely perfect. She looked up to find Nathan staring at both of them with tears streaming unashamedly down his face. "We made that," he said in wonder. "We made a person." "We did," Fiona agreed, then shifted Noah slightly. "Do you want to hold your son?" Nathan took Noah with exquisite care, cradling the baby against his broad chest. He was so large, and Noah was so small, but there was no awkwardness in the way Nathan held him, only gentle confidence. "Hello, Noah," Nathan murmured. "I am your papa, and I promise to love you and protect you and teach you everything I know about being a good man." The midwife and doctor stayed overnight to make sure both Fiona and Noah were doing well, then departed the next morning with payment and gratitude. Fiona, Nathan, and Noah were left alone to begin figuring out how to be a family. Those early weeks were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Noah was a good baby overall, but he still needed to be fed every few hours, day and night. Fiona was overwhelmed with love and terror, certain she was doing everything wrong, but Nathan was there every step of the way. He changed diapers and walked the floor with Noah when the baby would not settle. He brought Fiona water and food while she nursed. He took over all the household tasks so she could focus on recovery and caring for their son. "You are amazing at this," Fiona said one night when Nathan had just gotten Noah back to sleep after a fussy spell. "I'm just doing what needs to be done," Nathan replied, settling back into bed beside her. "We are a team. We take care of each other and our son." By the time Noah was 2 months old, they had found their rhythm. Fiona's sisters came for an extended visit in July, cooing over their nephew and helping with chores. Mary, now 13, was surprisingly good with the baby, and Fiona found herself thinking about what kind of woman her youngest sister would grow to be. Their father had not come to visit even once, too consumed with his drinking and gambling now that he had money. Fiona felt sad about it, but also strangely relieved. She had built a new family here, one based on love and choice rather than obligation and fear. The years that followed were full and happy. Noah grew into a sturdy toddler with his father's brown eyes and his mother's auburn hair. He learned to walk on the porch of the cabin, taking his first wobbly steps between his parents while they laughed and cheered. He learned to talk, his first clear word being "Papa," much to Nathan's delight and Fiona's mock offense. When Noah was 2 years old, Fiona became pregnant again. This time, she was less nervous, more confident in her body's ability to carry and deliver a child. Eleanor Hayes was born on a cold January morning, arriving faster than her brother had. She was smaller than Noah had been, but no less healthy, with dark hair like both her parents and eyes that would eventually settle into the same warm brown as Nathan's. Nathan was utterly smitten with his daughter, carrying her everywhere and singing to her in a surprisingly pleasant baritone. "I am outnumbered now," he would joke. 2 against 2. "We need to stick together, Noah." But Noah adored his baby sister, wanting to help with everything. He would bring her toys and sing nonsensical songs to her. When she was old enough to sit up, he would sit beside her and carefully hand her blocks, patient when she knocked over anything he built. Fiona watched her family grow and felt a contentment so deep it sometimes brought tears to her eyes. This life she had built with Nathan, this home they had created together, was better than anything she could have imagined back when she was being pushed toward marriage with a man she did not love. When Eleanor was 6 months old, word came that Fiona's father had died. He had been found in an alley behind the saloon, his heart apparently giving out after one too many nights of drinking. Fiona felt a complicated mix of grief and relief. She grieved for the father he could have been, for the relationship they never had. But she was also relieved that her sisters would no longer be subject to his temper and neglect. Mary was 17 now, and Sarah was 19. At the funeral, which Fiona and Nathan attended with the children, Fiona made them both an offer. "Come live with us," she said. "Both of you. The cabin is getting crowded, but Nathan can build an addition, or we can build a second cabin nearby. I know you are old enough to be on your own, but you do not have to be. You are family, and family takes care of each other." The sisters looked at each other, having a silent conversation the way sisters do, and then Sarah shook her head. "Thank you," she said, "but I have been offered a position as a teacher in Silver City. It is what I have always wanted to do. And Mary has a young man courting her here in town, a good man who works at the livery stable." Fiona felt a pang at the realization that her baby sisters were grown and making their own lives, but also pride. They were strong and capable, making good choices. "If you ever need anything," she said firmly, "you come to us. Promise?" "Promise," both sisters said. Life continued its steady march forward. Nathan expanded the cabin, adding a second bedroom for the children and a larger kitchen area for Fiona. Noah started helping with simple chores around the homestead, feeding chickens and collecting eggs. Eleanor grew into a fearless toddler who followed her brother everywhere and showed an early talent for climbing anything climbable. When Noah was 5 and Eleanor was 3, Fiona became pregnant for a third time. This pregnancy was harder than the previous two, leaving her exhausted and nauseated well into the second trimester. But Nathan was patient and supportive, taking over even more of the household work and keeping the children entertained so Fiona could rest. Samuel Hayes was born in October, a small baby who came 3 weeks earlier than expected. The birth was quick but frightening, and for a few terrible moments after he was delivered, Samuel did not cry. Nathan had ridden for the doctor again, and the man worked quickly, clearing the baby's airway and stimulating him until finally, a thin wail emerged. Fiona held Samuel close, tears streaming down her face, while Nathan held both of them. "He is all right," the doctor assured them. "Sometimes babies just need a little extra help starting out, but his color is good now, and his breathing is strong. He will be fine." And Samuel was fine. He grew into a quiet, observant child who watched everything with serious gray eyes. He was smaller than his siblings had been at the same age, but he was healthy and loved, and that was what mattered. The Hayes homestead became known in the area as a place of warmth and welcome. Other families settling in the mountains would sometimes stop by, and Nathan and Fiona would share supplies and advice freely. Fiona became skilled at midwifery, having learned much from her own experiences and from Mrs. Sullivan. She helped deliver babies for several neighboring families, always refusing payment, but never refusing help. When Noah was 8, he asked his father to teach him to trap and hunt. Nathan was thrilled, and they began taking trips into the mountains together, Nathan passing on all his knowledge about tracking and wilderness survival. Noah proved to be a natural, with his father's size and strength emerging as he grew, but he had his mother's gentle heart, and Nathan made sure to teach him about respecting the land and taking only what was needed. Eleanor, at 6, decided she wanted to learn to shoot like her mother. Fiona taught her carefully, emphasizing safety above all else, and Eleanor proved to have inherited Fiona's natural eye. "We have a family of sharpshooters," Nathan joked proudly. Samuel, at 3, was content to stay close to home, helping his mother with cooking and preserving and tending the expanded garden. He had a gift for growing things, and Fiona encouraged it, teaching him about different plants and their uses. Sarah married her young man from the livery stable when she was 22, and Fiona stood up with her at the wedding. The man, whose name was Thomas, was indeed good, patient, and kind with a steady income. They settled in Pinos Altos and started their own family. Mary became a teacher in Silver City, finding fulfillment in educating children and eventually meeting a fellow teacher who won her heart. The years rolled on, marked by seasons changing and children growing. The cabin expanded again as the family's needs changed. Nathan built a separate workshop for himself where he could work on leather goods and carpentry during the winter months. Fiona established a proper schoolroom area where she taught the children reading, writing, and arithmetic. They celebrated birthdays and holidays, creating traditions unique to their family. Every Christmas, Nathan would take the children into the forest to select the perfect tree, and they would decorate it with strings of popcorn and cranberries and handmade ornaments. Every spring, they would have a planting party where even the youngest child had their own small plot to tend. Every summer, they would spend 1 week camping higher in the mountains, exploring new areas and teaching the children wilderness skills. When Noah was 15, a young woman's family settled in a valley about 10 miles from the Hayes homestead. Her name was Lily, and she had blonde hair and blue eyes and a laugh that made Noah's face turn red. Fiona watched her eldest son navigate the confusing waters of first love with a mixture of amusement and nostalgia. "He is so much like you," she told Nathan one evening as they watched Noah clean up for the 3rd time that day, preparing to ride over to visit Lily's family. "How so?" Nathan asked, grinning. "He knows what he wants and he is willing to work for it, but he is also patient and respectful. You taught him that." "We taught him that," Nathan corrected, pulling her close. "You have shaped these children just as much as I have." They stood together on the porch, watching the sunset over the mountains that had become so familiar, so beloved. Noah rode off toward Lily's home, and Eleanor was in the garden with Samuel, the two of them arguing good-naturedly about something. The chickens clucked contentedly in their coop, and smoke rose from the chimney of their cabin, carrying the scent of the stew Fiona had prepared for dinner. "Did you ever imagine this?" Fiona asked softly. "Back when you first saw me crying under that tree? Did you imagine we would build all of this?" Nathan was quiet for a moment, considering. "I imagined possibility," he finally said. "I imagined that maybe, just maybe, we could find something good together. But this?" He gestured to encompass the homestead, the children, the life they had built. "This exceeds anything I could have dreamed." Fiona turned to look up at him, this mountain man who had offered her a choice when she had none, who had given her freedom and then made her want to stay. His hair was starting to show threads of silver now, and there were lines around his eyes from years of sun and laughter. He was still strong, still protective, still the steady center of their family. "I love you," she said, the words as true now as they had been the first time she spoke them. "I loved you then, and I love you now, and I will love you always." Nathan cupped her face in his large, calloused hands, the same hands that had built their home and delivered their children and held her through joy and sorrow. "And I love you," he said. "You are the best choice I ever made, Fiona Hayes, the very best." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of 20 years of shared life. When they pulled apart, Eleanor was calling them for dinner, and Samuel was laughing at something, and the world was exactly as it should be. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges as all years do. There were hard winters and dry summers, illnesses and injuries, moments of worry and grief. But through it all, the foundation Nathan and Fiona had built held strong. They faced everything together, supporting each other and their children, building a legacy of love and strength. Noah married Lily when he was 19 and she was 18, and they built their own cabin on a piece of land Nathan and Fiona gave them as a wedding present. Within 2 years, Noah and Lily made Nathan and Fiona grandparents for the first time. A baby boy they named Nathan Jr., but called Junior to avoid confusion. Eleanor grew into a skilled horsewoman and hunter, accompanying her father on longer and longer expeditions into the wilderness. She was in no hurry to marry, declaring that she had too much she wanted to see and do first. Nathan fully supported her independence, having raised her to be strong and self-sufficient. Samuel discovered a talent for drawing and painting, creating beautiful images of the mountains and wildlife. When he was 12, a traveling artist passed through and saw Samuel's work, encouraging him to pursue formal training. Fiona and Nathan scraped together the money to send him to Santa Fe for a year to study, and Samuel returned with even greater skill and a quiet confidence he had not possessed before. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Nathan took Fiona on a trip, just the two of them. Noah and Lily agreed to watch the homestead, and Nathan led Fiona deep into the mountains to a place he had discovered years ago, but never shown anyone. It was a high meadow ringed by peaks with a crystal-clear lake fed by snowmelt. Wildflowers carpeted the ground, and the sky seemed impossibly blue. They camped there for 3 days, swimming in the cold water and making love under the stars and talking about everything and nothing. "Thank you," Fiona said on their last evening there, lying with her head on Nathan's chest and watching the stars emerge. "For what?" "For choosing me, for offering me a choice, for building this life with me." Nathan's arm tightened around her. "Thank you for choosing me back, for taking a chance on a crazy mountain man who interrupted your crying." "Best decision I ever made," Fiona said, echoing his words from years before. "Best decision we ever made," Nathan corrected. As they grew older, their hair turning more silver than brown, their faces marking time with wrinkles and weathered skin, Nathan and Fiona remained deeply in love. They were grandparents several times over now, with Noah and Lily having given them 4 grandchildren. Eleanor eventually married a fellow wilderness enthusiast, a man who worked as a guide and map maker, and they had twins. Samuel married a woman he met in Santa Fe, an artist like himself, and they divided their time between the city and the mountains. The Hayes homestead became a gathering place for the extended family, especially during holidays. The cabin had been expanded so many times it was almost unrecognizable from the simple one-room structure Nathan had originally built. There was always room for one more, always food enough to share, always love enough to go around. When Nathan was 57 and Fiona was 52, they decided to take another trip to their high meadow. Their children tried to talk them out of it, worried about the difficulty of the journey, but Nathan and Fiona were insistent. They were older, yes, but they were still strong, still capable. The trip took longer than it had 25 years before, and they had to stop to rest more often. But when they reached the meadow, it was just as beautiful as Fiona remembered, perhaps even more so viewed through the lens of 52 years of lived life. They spent a week there, talking about their past and their future, reminiscing about their children and marveling at how quickly time had passed. They made plans for the homestead, for how they wanted their later years to look, for what legacy they wanted to leave. "I want our grandchildren to know," Fiona said one evening, "that they always have choices, that they should never feel trapped or forced into a life they do not want. I want them to know they can choose freedom and love and happiness." "They will know," Nathan promised, "because they will have our story. They will know that their grandmother was brave enough to choose an unknown mountain man over a cage with golden bars. They will know that their grandfather was crazy enough to offer marriage to a stranger because he could not stand to see her trapped." "We were crazy," Fiona laughed. "The best kind of crazy," Nathan agreed. On their last night in the meadow, as they lay wrapped in blankets and watching the stars, Fiona felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. Her life had been full and rich, filled with love and purpose and meaning. She had been a wife and mother, a midwife and teacher, a friend and sister. She had built a home in the wilderness and raised children who were good and strong. She had loved and been loved in return. "No regrets?" Nathan asked softly, as if reading her thoughts. "Not a single one," Fiona replied. "You?" "Never," Nathan said firmly. "Every moment has been worth it, every choice, every challenge, every joy. All of it." They returned to the homestead, renewed and at peace, ready for whatever years remained. They continued to be active in their children's and grandchildren's lives, offering wisdom and support, but never trying to control. They tended their land and their animals, their bodies slower now, but their spirits still strong. When Fiona was 63, she became ill with a fever that would not break. Nathan nursed her with the same gentle devotion he had shown throughout their marriage. But despite his care and the doctor's treatments, she grew weaker. On a warm June morning, 38 years after Nathan had first offered her a choice, Fiona woke to find Nathan sitting beside the bed, holding her hand. Their children were gathered in the cabin, along with several of their grandchildren. She could hear the murmur of their voices, the sound of life continuing. "Nathan," she whispered, and he leaned close to hear her. "I am here," he said, his voice steady despite the tears on his cheeks. "I'm right here." "Thank you," Fiona said, squeezing his hand with what little strength she had left. "Thank you for the best life I could have asked for." "Thank you for choosing me," Nathan replied, pressing his forehead to hers. "Thank you for every moment, every day, every year. I love you, Fiona Hayes. I have loved you since the moment I saw you, and I will love you until I draw my last breath and beyond." "And I love you," Fiona whispered. "Tell our children, tell our grandchildren that they should always choose love, always choose freedom, always choose happiness. Tell them our story and let it give them courage to make their own brave choices." "I will," Nathan promised. "I will tell them every detail, and they will know what a remarkable woman you were." Fiona smiled, her eyes drifting closed. "Not remarkable. Just a woman who was given a choice and chose love." Those were her last words. She slipped away peacefully, surrounded by family, held by the man who had loved her for nearly 4 decades. The grief that followed was profound, but it was also mixed with gratitude for the beautiful life they had shared. Nathan lived for another 12 years, staying active and engaged with his family. He never remarried, saying that he had already had the love of his life and did not need to search for another. He spent his remaining years telling stories to his grandchildren and great-grandchildren, making sure they all knew the story of how he had seen their grandmother being pushed toward marriage and had offered her a choice. He told them about finding her crying under a ponderosa pine, about the instant connection he had felt, about the crazy decision to marry a stranger. He told them about the early days of learning to live together, about the slow growth of love and trust, about building a life and a family in the mountains. He told them about every joy and every challenge, painting a picture of a marriage that was real and imperfect and absolutely beautiful. When Nathan died at the age of 81, he was laid to rest beside Fiona in the small cemetery they had established on their land. His children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered to say goodbye and to celebrate a life extraordinarily well lived. The homestead remained in the family, passed down through the generations. The cabin was maintained and expanded, becoming a beloved gathering place for Hayes family reunions. Children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren grew up hearing the story of Nathan and Fiona, of the mountain man and the woman who chose freedom. And in each generation, there were those who took the story to heart, who made their own brave choices in pursuit of love and happiness and freedom. They chose partners who respected them, built lives that reflected their values, and raised children who understood the importance of agency and choice. The legacy Nathan and Fiona built was not measured in land or money or possessions, though the family eventually prospered. It was measured in love freely given, in choices consciously made, in the courage to step into the unknown when the known path leads to unhappiness. Years after both Nathan and Fiona had passed, one of their great-great-granddaughters stood in the meadow they had loved so much. She was 18 years old, on the cusp of adulthood, facing her own difficult choice about her future. She thought about the story she had been told so many times, about her ancestors who had chosen each other when they were strangers, who had built something beautiful from a foundation of respect and freedom. She thought about Fiona, standing at the edge of town with tears on her face and no good options, being pushed toward a marriage that would have destroyed her spirit. She thought about Nathan, a lone mountain man with a kind heart, crazy enough to offer marriage to a stranger because it was the right thing to do. And she thought about the choice Fiona had made, the brave, terrifying choice to accept Nathan's offer and step into an unknown future. That choice had led to decades of love and happiness, to children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, to a legacy that continued to ripple outward through time. The young woman took a deep breath, feeling the strength of her ancestors flowing through her veins, and made her own brave choice. She chose the path that felt right in her heart rather than the one others expected her to take. She chose freedom and possibility over security and expectation. And in that moment, standing in the high meadow where wildflowers bloomed and peaks touched the sky, she felt the presence of her great-great-grandparents. She felt Nathan's steady strength and Fiona's courageous heart. She felt the love they had built and the legacy they had left. She understood truly and deeply that the greatest gift they had given their descendants was not land or wealth or even the stories themselves. It was the understanding that everyone deserves choices, that love should be freely chosen, and that courage and kindness can build something that lasts far beyond a single lifetime. The story of the mountain man who saw a woman being pushed toward marriage and offered her a choice became more than just a family legend. It became a guiding principle, a North Star, a reminder that the bravest thing anyone can do is choose their own path and help others do the same. And so the legacy continued, generation after generation, each one adding their own chapter to the story while holding true to the core values Nathan and Fiona had established on that July day in 1873, when a mountain man and a desperate young woman took a chance on each other and built something extraordinary. The Hayes family homestead still stood in the New Mexico mountains, a testament to love and choice and the enduring power of courage. And visitors, walking through the carefully preserved cabin and looking at the faded photographs and reading the letters and journals that had been kept, could still feel the presence of that great love story, could still sense the warmth and strength that Nathan and Fiona had built into every log and beam. Their story reminded everyone who heard it that life is made up of choices, and that sometimes the bravest choice is the one that feels most terrifying. It reminded people that true love is built on respect and freedom, not control and obligation. It reminded them that home is not a place, but a feeling, created by people who choose each other every single day. And in the end, that was the true legacy of Nathan and Fiona Hayes. Not just the family they created or the land they settled, but the example they set for how to live and love with courage and kindness and unwavering respect for each other's humanity. Their story began with a choice offered and accepted, and it bloomed into something beautiful that touched countless lives across decades and generations. It proved that sometimes the most important thing one person can do for another is simply to offer them a choice when they have none, to see their potential for happiness and help them claim it. Nathan saw Fiona being pushed toward marriage, a marriage that would have trapped and diminished her. He offered her a choice, expecting nothing, hoping for everything. She chose him, not knowing where that choice would lead, but trusting her instinct that it had to be better than the alternative. And from that simple, brave choice made by two strangers on a July afternoon in the mountains of New Mexico, a legacy of love was born that would endure for generations, inspiring others to make their own brave choices in pursuit of happiness and freedom and love.